So let me just go ahead and introduce the panel first. It's an incredible honor. In fact, in the context of this, in the last 25 days, I've been talking to each one of them. And I couldn't have asked for a better slot or even the content and then even the people like here. So I have Dr. Rohini Srivatsa here. And she obviously is the National Technology Officer with Microsoft. And I think a lot of you don't even need an introduction to her, I'm sure. She's quite a passionate advocate of wellness. She speaks AI and emerging areas very, very powerfully. And I think she's one of the top 100 people recognized as the AI influential leader. So that's an amazing thing. I'm sure you can correct me or even actually add new dimensions to something that we spoke about earlier. That's one. Then I have, obviously, I have Chetan Singh, Dr. Chetan Singh from Indian Institute of Science. We're working with Chetan on several areas of edge and neuromorphic. And I wanted to, get Chetan here and then have him specifically tell us how real it is. That it's okay to do a lot of academic activities, but is it really driving some of the change that we see now? That's one part. Then I have Nagananda and Nagananda Doreswamy, and then again, I don't think people in CII need an introduction. You seem to know quite a few people here, Nagananda, but I think with so many of us depending on the emergence of startup ecosystem, and even through Accenture, we work with so many of them. And when I was with Microsoft too, I was very, very closely associated with the open innovation ecosystem. And you sort of are represent the backbone of that. And I want to check with you, how do you see that changing? What new ideas are emerging? And how are we encouraging new ideas in the first place? So that's that. Then I'll move on. We have Praful Chandra. Like I said earlier, Praful Chandra is the founder and CEO of Coin Earth. He told me it's a very interesting amalgamation of concepts by themselves. But more than anything else, I just absolutely love his narrative on how he goes from the internet era to all the way to the metaverse. So Praful, I look forward to having a few questions and then just get that same excitement into the audience here. So that's the idea. Okay. And when we have Ganesh Ramurthy, I spoke with Gartner. We work with Gartner quite a bit. And I said, I'm not going to go out there in CII and talk about things which is not independently validated by somebody. So thanks, Ganesh, for having flown in from Mumbai for this. So Ganesh is going to give us a lot more perspective, but more than anything else, he specifically watches the technology trends. And he's perhaps a lot more informed than I can ever be. So Ganesh, looking forward to talking to you as well. Then I have Derek Jose. Derek Jose, of course, works with Flutura. He is the founder member of Flutura, and Derek is going to talk to us about how industrial AI. I know there is a very dedicated segment in the afternoon today or tomorrow, but then I want to hear Derek's thoughts on how he's working even with government to make digital twin. And we heard in the morning that the government is also so approachable today and adaptive to the change that we're seeing. And then I thought the conversations with Derek will be very enlightening to see where they're embracing the new technologies in that speed, right? I have really a big panel to even be able to, okay. And in no particular order, we have Nitin Mittal here. I recently learned that besides the work that we are doing on Metaverse, Accenture actually created a business itself on Metaverse. We have a specific Metaverse business group. And Nitin was one of the first few to actually embrace the thought and then say, can we actually bring in a whole Metaverse solution in place? And that's just one connection point. That's how I started to learn about Nitin. And I now know that he's leading several different changes within Z Entertainment as their president for data and other technologies. And then it's very exciting discussion with Nitin because media, if anything, is, according to me, the barometer of the culture and the change. So I wanted to see, content proliferation is what we are seeing today. How does he see governance of all of that? in the future. And then we have seen Metaverse also throw unique challenges to us in terms of governance of content. So it'll be very exciting to hear Nitin's thoughts on that. And last but not the least, I have my colleague and friend, Rajiv Nair, right next to me. Rajiv, you support me when I'm going through this now. So Rajiv leads our industry network and is also, of course, a familiar face within CII. He is part of the banking committee of CII. And Rajiv, I've got here to make sure that while we talk about all of these technologies and changes, how does he see that from the innumerable number of clients he meets in across various industries? And I'm sure there's a lot of cross-pollination that's happening of ideas between the industries. And that's something that I thought I will bring it up with him. So very, very illustrious group here. And let me just get started with it. So Dr. Rohini, I started my segment with a very, very passionate pitch on Earth and sustainability. And I know that essentially Microsoft's technology touches almost all aspects of the enterprise. And therein lies huge potential to think about sustainability itself everywhere, right, across an enterprise and every area of the functioning. I just thought that would be the first best way to ask you to speak about what is Microsoft doing in the sustainability space, and it's also something you're very passionate about.
Thanks, Kiran. So first of all, let me thank Kiran for a really interesting opening session, very interesting set of technologies, and for bringing all of us together. It's quite an eclectic panel, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of my colleagues here. Let me start by saying that, look, sustainability is a topic that's being talked about a lot. It's a huge, huge issue. It's a planet underestimated. So what I talk about Microsoft is not about Microsoft. It's about how, as an organization, we are trying to enable the larger ecosystem to address this challenge, because it is indeed a burning platform. As a company, we have taken a view to say that let's look at 4 areas we will focus on: carbon, water, waste, and ecosystems. In a way, it's defining our focus, if you will. But the reality of it is we can't do this alone. Therefore, ability to work with our customers, partners, the suppliers, our products and services, taking our employees together is the way to do it, because we rely on our partner ecosystem, Accenture being one of them, of course everybody on this table in some form or another, to create new solutions, whether it may be IoT-based solutions for water management, whether it is efficient, wind farm deployment, etc. It's endless, right? We made some commitments towards certain net zero kind of commitments, but I think to me, though, that's just a small part of what Microsoft should do. I think the bigger part is to help the ecosystem. There are certain things we are doing in terms of making sure on that front to get data out there, because there's actually a very big data problem. The problem is that how do you measure, so I think it's a big data problem, which is why one of the things we've done, for example, is put a planetary computer out there. What that means is a whole set of data sets on geological surveys, on various water systems, etc., which has been put out there as open data for people to build on. Another thing we are doing in terms of innovation fund, but I'll just stop there. There's just so much, we can have a full conversation on this. I'll ask my panelists to add in. Thank you.
That's awesome, thank you. So yeah, with that Earth part, let me just move now to Ganesh directly. Ganesh, I mean, I touched about 7 distinct things. It's just the best that my head could grapple with all the dramatic changes, like I said earlier, that are happening. What I wanted to talk to you about is, did I leave out something? I mean, is there something that's outside of all of this, which is even as dramatic?
No, I wouldn't say you really didn't leave out anything. You had a wide canvas, so everything under the sun was pretty much there. But I definitely do want to kind of draw everybody's attention to an important trend that's been happening in the last 2 years time period. the world, when it got attacked by the pandemic, uh, was completely destroyed by the supply chain disruptions. Organizations were literally struggling to optimize resilience. Resilience was a major, major thing there, right? Now, what we've seen in those 2 years with all of these disruptions is companies starting to think about building enterprise digital immune systems that cut across all of these different functions, supply chain being the core of it, making the supply chain immune to all of these new disruptions, making your other functions more immune to all of these disruptions, and bringing them all together into one single umbrella. That's digital immune system that we're talking about, and that's catching up rapid fire these days. So it's there in one of those themes that you did talk about, but that's an important trend that I'm seeing definitely going on there. The other part, when you talked about responsible AI, what I'm trying to say is what we call as the AI TRISM. AI TRISM is AI, trust, risk, and security management. When you have AI TRISM, your AI automatically becomes responsible. So that is another trend that organizations are really trying to kind of think about and build systems around that. So those two things kind of underline that. And there are other fundamental technology changes and new materials. We can talk about that. And semiconductors are very close to my heart, so there is plenty of new semiconductor materials that will literally transform the way computing is going to be done in the future. There are lots of innovations that are happening in those spaces as well.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll just move to Nitin now. So Nitin, now, it's you straight very recently. We just got the Metaverse business, and I was talking to you about you being one of the early adopters of it. So I actually wanted to contextualize this. There's enough good press, bad press, everything about Meta and what Metaverse can or cannot do. And the experiences in the Metaverse are yet to get to that part which justifies me putting an Oculus on my head for the longest time. So what made you take that leap of faith, and what were you looking for to accomplish in Metaverse? That's one part.
Yeah, thanks, Kiran. So what we were looking for. So in last 2.5 years, all of us have gone through a change in the way we interact, conduct our meetings, collaborate, and celebrate. And the technology which used to exist and still exist is pretty much two-dimensional in nature, which is it gives you a barrier where the conversations are very, I would say, pretty boring beyond a point of time. You don't get the human perspective where all your senses are involved. It creates more fatigue. And Z today is going through a major cultural transformation. From the time we have made hybrid working as a policy and the mantra to collaborate together, our content ecosystem, our studios, our technology, data teams, and corporate teams are all over India, and we are spread across 190 countries. So while we adopted what was available there, it was becoming evident that it's not sustainable. And as a new fresh talent comes on board, they are finding it difficult to embed themselves into the culture of the company. And as last 2.5 years, things evolved over virtual reality. This was a good opportunity to experiment. And the best people to adapt to change are the freshers, because they don't come with any biases, any prejudice, and they are born in the digital ecosystem. So we took this opportunity to pilot with them, where we onboarded 100 odd freshers from campus onto our platform through Metaverse experience. I think post that we have extended it to almost 500 more lateral recruits who have come on board. And what is given to us is that we are able to do the inductions in far more engaging way, which helps us to tell a story of the organization in far more involved manner. It also helps us to now conduct celebrations together, which looks more real and human rather than cutting cakes on Teams call or a Zoom call. Yeah. And also importantly that our work piece, which is around collaboration specifically with creators in our ecosystem. And it's not only the employees. As a content company, we deal with thousands of them. Our idea is to extend it beyond our four walls of organization and then take it to the next stage. We are hoping that we are not tied on to the device technology which we have. So looking forward to more innovation in that space so that it becomes really pervasive in that way.
True, true. Excellent, well said. So I'm going to move from there to the Indian Institute of Science campus now. So Dr. Chetan, I know in talking to you, you were saying that you have the engineering background, but then your fascination remains to be the brain. And it's like a theoretical limit, applying the same thing to understand it. So what I wanted to have a conversation with you is the work specifically in neuromorphic. I know we are doing a few highly experimental work in sort of bionic materials with Israel and others, but specifically with the Indian Institute of Science, what I wanted to know is that what are you specifically focus on in that space?
Right. So as you pointed out, by training, I'm an engineer, but this interest in the brain lead me to this area of neuromorphic computing. And with Accenture, we are working in the area of tiny ML neuromorphic. Those who are not aware what is neuromorphic, let me just explain briefly. So we are trying to understand the fundamental principles behind the brain and try to build the intelligence system using those principles. So for example, if you see the brain, it's one of the best computing system has been evolved over billion years of evolution process, right? So if you see in terms of, as an engineer, you can think about is the best in terms of power, performance, and area matrix, right? It's a 3D skull. Inside 3D skull, you have this 100 billion neurons and 100 trillion synapses. This is a massive system we are talking about. And if you think about in terms of power, right? Nowadays, we are talking about AI and all sort of stuff, but that takes gigawatts of power just to run. If you talk about this state-of-the-art GPT-3 system right now, which is used in NLP, natural language processing, right? That takes almost like a megawatts of power, right? You have to literally burn the lake to for the training purpose, right? But on the other hand, if you see, the brain just takes 25 watts of power, right? 20 to 20 watts of power, right? Which is huge, highly optimal in terms of power, performance, and area matrix. So, and we are nowhere close to it. So don't afraid that AI is coming close to us. Right now, the problem is we don't understand the brain. Still, if you ask someone, you will say, if you talk to any neuroscientist, they will say, okay, we just understand 1% or 2% of the brain, right? It's a huge, huge complex system. So the idea here in our lab is try to understand at least microcircuits of those, maybe visual pathway or acoustic pathway, and try to build those kind of intelligence system, right? And those, some of the things we are doing partnership with Accenture in that space. One is an acoustic space where we have used this cochlea, which is there in our inner ear, right? So, which is like a pre-processing stage before your sound goes into the auditory cortex V1, right? And it's a very beautiful sensory system which is often ignored. So we have modeled that cochlea on silicon and try to use as a pre-processing stage and try to build tiny ML, you can say tiny ML or tiny machine learning systems for real use cases. In fact, some of our effort so here again, as I said, the power is the key thing. So that the device which we build, it takes around milliwatts of power, and we are trying to deploy in Northeast area so that it can work on the edge directly and build the sensor network with that. And it's mainly for gunshot detection or poaching cases, right? So this is one of the application in acoustic domain, I would say. Similarly, in the vision, right? So there is a you can search about it. It's called silicon retina, right? It is different kind of image sensor. Commonly, you will see all these cameras, right? It's a very dumb imager. If you see just a photodiode, and then you just take huge amount of data, I would say giga samples per second. You are hogging the bandwidth, right? But on the other hand, if you see our Retina is super efficient. You're doing a lot of processing just at the Retina level, and then you send to the brain, right? So there are a lot of smart. There is a lot of effort in Silicon Retina side, and there is a actual product, and that was completely different paradigm. So it can go literally, I would say, like microsecond of latency. So it's perfect for drone or closed loop control systems. So these are the two effort which we are trying to do with the sensor, but down the line we want to take it to the other sensory modality like IMU or radar as such. And down the line, as I said, we are doing with currently the project is mainly you want to of course match the cost. So we are doing just at the MCU level, but we have multiple verticals in our lab. One is microcontroller based, one is FPGA, which is a little better in terms of power performance in area, and one is completely analog computing. This is what brain has been evolved. If you see brain as an engineer, you can think about it's like a mixed signal design. All the computation is happening in analog, and the communication between the neurons, it's a digital, which is just like a spike, right? So those kind of system we built in the lab, and that's completely analog. It's one of the first process scalable system we built. It's called RA, but you can Google it and you will find details about those chips, what we built. Yeah, so these are some of the stuff which we do in the lab. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. That's excellent. Great insights actually into the the workings of the brain itself. So appreciate it. So the next question will be for Praful. If you noticed, I touched about every topic very quickly, and I left the Web 3.0 because I wouldn't fathom doing any introduction on that. So yeah, why don't you actually go ahead and quickly give me and the team here a demystification of Web 3.0. That's one part. And you may want to follow that up with what needs to change in our policies and in the way. I'm sure there are a lot of unlearnings that we have to do before we actually capitalize and benefit from Web 3.0. I'm not even going anywhere near the crypto and other things yet, but just the Web 3.0 itself.
Sure. So the way we see Web 3, it's an umbrella term that is being used today. I think Nitin talked about part of it, which had got to do with virtual reality. Right? That is the interactivity or the experience layer. And Nitin covered it pretty well, so I'm not going to speak about that. I think if you dive below the virtual reality layer, what we are seeing with Web3 is a much tighter integration of computer science and economics. Right? And if you look at where we have come and where we are going, where we have come from, I think the worst part is over. And the worst part was the speculation. Whether it was crypto or NFTs, the last 18 months have been dominated by speculative trading of these assets, which for good, I hope, is now done. Okay? Where we are right now is a space of economics where we call property rights for digital assets. Right? What does that mean? If you think about it, the web was designed for content sharing. Unfortunately, what that meant was the people who created the content had very little control over who can use that content. And what that led to was anybody and everybody creating walled gardens of content. Where we see this going next is digital assets having property rights. And that's a very abstract statement. So I'll give you 3 examples to make it real. Right? 3 months ago, Twitter launched something called the Hexagon profile picture. What that meant was that if you want your profile picture to be hexagon, you can put content inside that if and only if you can prove to Twitter that you own that photograph or image. Now, how do you prove to Twitter that you own that picture? And that's where technologies like NFTs and blockchain come in. Let's go one step further. Less than 3 weeks ago, Instagram and Facebook announced support for digital walls. Right? Think of these as walls that you and me had in our bedrooms growing up, where we could put a poster. And we used to buy these posters from the footpath or an Archie's shop. and pay for the right to display these posters. Same thing is happening on Instagram as we speak, where people are willing to pay money to buy digital content, which they want to put on their walls. And Instagram and Facebook are saying, you can put a content on your digital wall if and only if you can prove to me that you own this digital content. Right? And again, this digital property rights comes in. So that's where we are. Where this is going to go in virtual environments is digital fashion. Right? If my avatar is there, is that avatar wearing clothes which are branded? How do you prove to somebody that you own a piece of virtual clothing? That is where this space of property rights of digital assets is going. We see this playing out right now, starting right now over the next 6 months. Phase 2 of this would be where we see, let me give you an example, right? Everybody has a wallet, right, in their back pocket, right? If you open your wallet, I'm going to pull out something here. Right? This is my employee access card, right? Almost everybody would have this. Both these assets, the wallet and the access pass, are going to become digital. What that means is that you're going to have a digital wallet or a Web3 wallet. Some of you may already have this. And inside that, you might have things like these, which will allow you to access certain areas in the digital space, or inside a virtual environment, or inside a physical environment. This is what we call a wallet, and this is what we call an access pass, and the digital access pass is what we call an NFT. Final phase of this, 2 years down the line, where we see this going, is that this will be in your control. Now, we don't realize this today, but our identities in the online world are not in our control. They are on the control. If you use your Gmail as your login, your identity is controlled by Google, right? If you use your phone number as a login, it is controlled by Airtel. But where it's going to go is your identity is going to be controlled by you, and you will decide how much of your identity you want to reveal to different websites. Sorry. So that's the final phase. Let me talk about the second question that you asked, which is what needs to change. I think the fundamental thing that needs to change is an education and regulation or policy at a much more finer layer of resolution than we are talking about today. Right? In the Web3 world, on one end of the spectrum, you have stable coins, right? Where there is no scope for speculation because one stable coin is mapped to $1 or €1 or ₹1. And on the other end of the spectrums are NFTs, right? NFTs are simply put nothing but a digital certificate. That certificate can be a certificate of ownership. It could be an access pass certificate. All of these can be NFTs. If we start regulating everything in these two ends of the spectrum under one regulatory policy, we are signing up for disaster. And we are going to get left behind. So I think the number one need of the hour is a regulatory policy which treats these things with a fine-grained level of resolution.
Excellent. Very well put. I think this is perhaps the most comprehensive understanding of 3.0 one can get very quickly. So appreciate it, as always. So from the mind of a startup, I want to get to the mind of a new breed of investors. So Naganan, in talking with you, you were telling me that while Idea Spring is what you call it, you can call your fund itself the startup. So, with so much dramatic things that are being brought up as potential ideas for you, it's been all our wish to get into the mind of an investor and see what do you look for in that, and how do you actually invest, nurture, and curate some of those ideas to become an actual business that thrives.
Yeah, so I think most of the people in the room also will be tracking what's happening in the industry with respect to startups. The past decade has been, we have set a furious pace, I would say, in terms of what has happened in the startups. India has raised 150 or $175 billion in capital. Last year we invested 35 billion. This year, I think 25 billion in startups, and we say we have 60,000 or 80,000 plus startups. This is a huge number. But I think most importantly, we are both the B2C kind of startup that we had, which includes Flipkart, Swiggy, and the likes. What has also transformed is we are looking at more innovative startups, aka product startups now, right? If you look at the current trend of where we are in the market, there's a humongous amount of product-based startups that are coming up. And these are solving problems not only for India, but it's also solving problems for the world, right? So I think we have demonstrated the capability to sell our products across the world, not just in India. And then we have become quite good at SaaS-oriented startups.
Yeah.
I think we have still ways to go in terms of deep tech, deep science projects, startups, because one, the market in India is still not mature enough to absorb those kinds of startups. When you talk about semiconductors and so on and so forth, the market still is still in the nascent stage in India, even space startups, for example.
Yeah.
But we are starting to make progress. But in terms of regular, product innovation, I think we are up there, and they are extremely exciting times. And no doubt that we will be amongst the top 3 countries in the world. We are already in that space, but we will be top 3, amongst the top 3 in building products for the world. And I think everybody will come to India. Whether it's investors, and companies, MNCs, whoever it is, I think these are quite exciting times. And one transformation that I see, at least in all the entrepreneurs I meet, is the confidence. The kind of confidence that is exhibited by entrepreneurs today, what at least I used to see in 2015 or 2016, is a huge difference. And that difference is not only in our ability with respect to technology, but our ability in marketing and sales. Because it's one thing to build products, but it's a different ballgame to sell products. But I think we have evolved quite a bit in all these various aspects. But in my own eyes, in my own lens, I think next decade will be a lot of innovation. And I think India, in addition to innovating in technology, there are also life sciences, which you touched upon in your deck. I think there's a huge push by the government in terms of BIRAC and other aspects where they're supporting large amount of science-based, life sciences-based projects and research. I think that will evolve as well. But in terms of true deep tech, I would say, we still will lag in terms of adopting those products in India. We'll probably, once we become a $10 trillion economy, I think that will start to change as well. So that's kind of where I see the industry moving, but very, very exciting times.
Awesome. It's so very encouraging for some of us who work with so many, startups. Today, for example, when we have client visits, even with Accenture, the willingness with which they listen to the startups that we can bring along on a conversation. We may be doing work on the core or some transformative work, which requires a very large engagement with them. But then there are this almost edge. The entire edge is controlled by the brilliant minds of the new startups. And then we will not stay invested in something like that because it's very industry specific in most cases. And that's so brilliant to see a reiteration of the same thing there.
Correct. So if you look at the evolution, 90s was all about services, right? Where, Infosys and other startups that really set the path for what we could do going forward. And then it was B2C kind of companies that emerged in the 2010s. Now I think next decade will be B2B.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the trend is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic.